So good to see you. Good afternoon.
Always great to see you, Alok. Thanks very much for the invitation and greetings from Tokyo.
Wow. So thank you very much. I hope Japan is doing great.
Japan is doing just fine. Of course, eyes are on India. Must say, India is taking an increasingly important role on the global stage, but the relationship between India and Japan is very strong.
Absolutely, forever, brothers. So thank you guys for joining us this meeting. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Building Future-Ready Organizations, the Strategic Role of Recruitment. My name is Alok Nidhi Gupta. I'm co-founder and CEO of TalentRecruit Software, and I will be your host for this exciting session. In today's rapidly evolving business landscape, being future-ready is no longer optional. It is necessity. Recruitment as the gateway to talent plays a critical role in shaping resilient and innovative organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you an extraordinary leader, visionary, and catalyst for change, Paul Dupuis. I'm going to take some time to introduce you, Paul. His outstanding and illustrious career is something you will truly enjoy learning about. Paul is global leader renowned for his hands-on approach to driving business growth and leading transformative organizational journey. With over 25 years of professional experience across Asia, including Japan, where he's currently sitting, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, and India, where he spent a lot of time as CEO of Randstad, he has consistently exemplified trailblazing achievements in leadership and innovation. As founder and CEO of Take-5 Global, Paul is at the helm of a consultancy that specializes in coaching, business advisory, leadership development, and mergers and acquisitions. Paul's leadership journey is marked by pivotal roles, including his tenure as CEO and chairman of Randstad Japan, where he drove unprecedented growth and profitability, and as managing director and CEO of Randstad India, where he led a remarkable turnaround, earning the company accolades as a major leader in recruiting and staffing industry and recognized as one of India's best leaders in times of crisis by Great Place to Work Institute in 2021. Beyond his corporate accomplishments, Paul is a member of MBA faculty at Global University, a thought leader, frequently featured in global forums, and a trusted external advisor at Bain & Company. His best-selling book, I must say all of you must read, the E5 Management and Leadership Development Collaboration with Marshall Goldsmith's exclusive 100 Coaches community, reflect his enduring commitment to building better leaders and better organizations. Notably, he orchestrated a Guinness World Record ice hockey game, wow, in the Himalayan region of Ladakh in India, highlighting his passion for sports and community impact. Truly awesome, Paul. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a leader who exemplifies excellence, innovation, and compassion, Paul Dupuis. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Alok, for that very, very kind introduction. And you mentioned a couple of things that gets me really excited. Of course, the connection with Japan and India, and even ice hockey in the Himalayas of India. I just returned recently. And by the way, I'm getting lots of messages, DMs right now as we're on here, Alok. I've got friends from all over the world who have joined us here today, including, of course, India, Japan, and so on. We have quite an international audience today. So thank you, everybody, for joining. It's great to see you all virtually here today.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's come to kick off this wonderful seminar. I'm sure going to be very insightful for our audience. So let's start with the big picture or a macro view, Paul. In your point of view, what does it mean for an organization to be future ready, and why is talent such a critical factor in achieving this?
Well, these are the critical questions that we need to talk about today, Alok, and of course they'll lead to more discussions. But first, let's define the terminology. You know, for a long time, and I think you would agree, Alok, many leaders around us talked about being future-proof. So future-proof organization, future-proof leadership. And the more I thought about that, and certainly after the experience in India, leading a very large ship of Randstad India with 70 plus offices in the country, more than 70,000 employees, both temporary and full-time employees. leading a ship through a storm. What you realize is that it's not good enough to be future-proof. Future-proof means static. Just imagine you're holding a shield and you're defending. That's future-proof. So when something comes, you're ready for it. On the other hand, future-ready means agility. Rather than holding a shield, you're holding various weapons to not only defend, but also to attack and also to sidestep and move forward. So it's about, rather than being on the heels and planting and defending, it's actually being ready to move side to side, to go with the flow, to be agile. And as we found during COVID and other crises over history, there are two types of leaders and two types of organizations in times of crisis. One type simply survives. There are the leaders and the organizations that just survive, and they focus on surviving. And the other type are leaders and organizations that thrive. And isn't it interesting that some of the most successful companies were born during the worst crises in modern history, right? From the stock market crash to the IT bubble burst to the GFC and so on. So that to me is what future readiness is all about. In other words, creating an organization that has the right leadership with the right skills, mindset, and agility to be ready for anything, to thrive even in terms of crisis.
Wow, I think that's a great approach when you are in toughest situation and how you see yourself, just to survive or take this as an opportunity to take to the next step or stage. So just to talk about us, Paul, TalentRecruit, we have been in 10 years in the business. I think when the COVID started and first 6 months were really tough for us to navigate, of course, for any organization. And we took that as an opportunity for us to take the next step to provide something outstanding to our customers across the world. And we rebuilt this platform during the COVID period. It took us a while to rebuild in deep technology and deep learning to drive the future while we create that entire talent ecosystem through our platform. So thanks. I think you made a massive point how you need to thrive when the time is tough. And Paul, please.
That's a great example, Alok, by the way. Thank you. And by the way, I've watched you and even I've been cheering as well, sometimes from the sidelines for you through this journey, because I met you first when you were really in the early days of this adventure. And absolutely reinventing, recreating, pivoting, having the guts, and also, well, we'll call it courage and guts, but also the smarts to know when to pivot. That is something that I think future readiness, that's a key ingredient of future readiness when it comes to leadership. You asked a question about talent, by the way, and what it means. Well, and that'll be a key theme, of course, for us today. What we know is that organizations that will go on and thrive in good times and bad are organizations that have a workforce, in other words, talent, which is also future ready. And so when we talk about attracting talent, we need to think about how we do that. And of course, the type of talent we're now targeting. In the old days, it used to be we wanted generalists, and then it shifted to specialists. And now we've gone back to generalists, but I would add generalists who learn quickly, who are agile, who are able to keep up with this crazy pace of change in the world. And so when it comes to talent acquisition, that world is also changing quickly, as you know best. And so the agility and the way we attract talent is also a really key part of this story.
Absolutely. I just want to touch upon your journey in Randstad India. So where I think it's nothing less than the case study for any business leader across the world, the way you transform, turn around its operation in no time. And I'm sure you must have deeply analyzed the problems Randstad India had that point of time and possibly the best solutions to navigate success and to make it future ready that ultimately made an impactful turnaround. So in view of that, Paul, what are some of the major challenges organization you believe face today in building future readiness?
Well, this is a very real life case study. Let me refer to the Randstad India study because I think it's quite relevant whether you're in India or not. It's a story of a ship that was sinking, struggling. We've all seen this. Maybe we're experiencing it right now. Some of you who are watching today, maybe an organization where the ship is shaking a bit or losing its way or not performing versus the market versus competitors. And certainly that was the case with Randstad in India when I joined. And my mission was to steady the ship first. Right? Before you accelerate, first you need to steady the ship. And then, of course, the next is to ensure that we had a leadership team that was future ready, along with a strategy that was also future ready, right? So these were all really important things that needed to be done right away and with a sense of urgency. Now, what we found was that we had a leadership team that in many ways was not future ready, and we needed to do something about that. That's where the courage comes in. Courageous decisions around making sure that you have the right people in the right seats on the bus. And that's certainly something that has not been invented by me. That's right from the book Good to Great by Jim Collins.
Yeah.
Get the right people on the bus in the right seats. And then the next thing is having the right people on the bus in the right seats is not enough. You have to then set a direction which is crystal clear. And we call that true north, right? So these are, let's say, phases of transformation. First, though, it always begins with people. And that's really the theme of what we're talking about today is attracting, developing, retaining, continuing to develop the right people, having them in the right seats, and then, of course, taking your vision to execution. So how we did it at Randstad India, well, there's a book about that I wrote. A big part of the story is in the book, of course. But certainly, we started with people. And for me, the very first thing, and I encourage all leaders to do this at one point, is to spend time with team members and asking that important question. One, why did you join this company? Why did you join this company? That's question one. Now, next question. Why do you stay in this company? Why do you stay here? So why did you join? Secondly, why do you stay? And the third question, which can unveil some really interesting things, is what is one thing that you would change? If you could change one thing in the company, what is it? And so that's what I did. I set off across the four corners of India, traveling across the country, meeting with colleagues. I called it Mission 150. So I met with 150 colleagues across the four corners of the organization. I was on the plane every Monday morning, traveling around the country to amazing places in India. But I was going with what my dad used to say, 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen first, speak next. So I was asking that important question again. Why did you join? Why do you stay? And what is one thing you would change? Alok, I filled up 3 notebooks full of a treasure chest of insights and information. And from that, I started to kind of see through the fog and started to have an idea of what needed to change. And what I discovered is we had a lot of great people that had a lot of the skills that we needed for the future, but they didn't have direction. So sometimes, actually, you've got the treasure right in front of you. You've got a great talent pool of people in your organization, but the vision, the direction, the true north is not crystal clear. In that case, it's about focusing on the vision and the mission. If, on the other hand, you have a crystal clear mission and vision and purpose, but you don't have the right people to execute, then it's about attracting the right people that connect with that vision and bringing them on board on your bus. I think you're on mute right now.
Sorry, looks like, so my apology for that. So I think a lot of people who are listening to your views on how to drive an organization successfully when you're seeing tough time and you are on a mission to do something great. So as you rightly mentioned, I think it's a great idea. I will also adopt this while asking a couple of questions from my own team. Why do they join? And why will they be there? And what is the one thing they would like to change? I'm pretty sure these 3 are very vital questions. And when you are at the helm of driving something big, it's understandable you need to take a couple of not so good decisions, ensuring that entire team comes with a purpose, with huge passion and a mission to do something great. And that's the possible reason that when you onboarded the ship, which was a little bit shaky, you were able to drive it, not only make it steady, but successfully driven. I know I have very well observed you during those times, and you are one of the, I'll say topmost ideal in terms of how you've been driving the marketing strategy, and I have learned a lot from you as well. Thanks for that.
You're very kind, Alok. People often say, how did I do it? I didn't do it. And this was triggered by bringing the right people together by bringing people with similar set of values, for example, people who connected with the vision. I think you'll find the same thing in your organization. You know, you're building something that's remarkable, but you need to build an organization of people that connect with your vision, that are on board, that get excited by it, that not only know it here, they get it here. And I think it's not about good people, bad people. This is not a judgment. I think it's really important to mention that. It's about people that really match and connect with your vision and get excited about it and lean in and want to be part of it. And that really is about future readiness. Again, you know, having the right people on your bus with the right mindset and perhaps the right skill set. All those skills can be built, but certainly having the right mindset and the right, let's say, the right passion for what you're trying to achieve. That and that's talent attraction moving forward is going to be all about that. Ultimately, getting the right people on your bus. Now, how to do that? Times have changed. Times are changing, I would say, ING. Anyone who's in talent acquisition knows right now that it's a whole new world on how we go about attracting that great talent.
Well said, Paul, you know, because it's not about good or bad people. It's about taking up a challenge, coming together and driving together as a mission. So I'm pretty sure it's a great statement to make, you know. So let's talk about recruitment as a strategic driver. You know, that's something which you love to maybe talk about. So recruitment today is about more than just filling vacancies, you know, Paul. Your experience has been always running large global recruitment and staffing organizations, and you have been a recruiter yourself. I know that when you started manual working, you know, when nothing existed, you know, even internet was not there probably, and the job boards were not there. And you were all across your life have been surrounded by recruiting community. So how has, you just spoke about it, how has the role of recruitment evolved to become a strategic driver for future ready organization?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. I think, you know, any of us who've been at this for a while remember the days of what we used to call a Rolodex. And it's funny, a lot of the younger folks don't know what a Rolodex was, but that was our database. It was a physical contraption that you would put the business cards into, right? And you would put it in alphabetical order. You take a business card, alphabetical order, and you turn it, right? And you go A, B, C, right? And I would look for Alok, so I would go to A and L, and I would pull the card out, and then I would pick up the phone and call Alok. There was no email, of course, right? The phone was our best friend. And of course, meeting face to face. Now, I still think in many ways, old school is the best school. Now, how we communicate might change a bit, but still that communication, that direct contact is always just as important as it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. When we talk about recruitment, of course, let's look back. If you remember when LinkedIn was launched, and we all heard this kind of mantra that was being said around, that this marks the sunset of the recruitment industry, because LinkedIn will disrupt, not only disrupt, it will take over. It will eliminate the need for the recruiter, because LinkedIn will do all that for you. Well, here's something interesting. By the way, I heard that 10 years ago, especially when LinkedIn was really gaining traction. And isn't it interesting that at least the companies I worked for, we went on after that to set new records. Best evers. The previous company I was with, which was, by the way, a job board in Japan. And then after that, of course, Randstad in Japan, setting records. In India, of course, as you know, setting records. Back to Japan, where we continue to break records. This is all under the threat of LinkedIn taking over. Okay, we know that LinkedIn didn't take over. If anything, what we started to realize is that technology is not a threat. If you view it as a threat, it becomes a threat. Okay. And so the same is true now with AI, with Gen AI, which is now the hot topic. Chat GPT-4 pretty soon will be old, right? And we're going to keep on going. Well, there's two ways to look at tech. One is a threat, one is a friend. I've always taken the stance that tech is something that enables us to give better touch. So leverage tech for touch. That's the mantra that I've kind of stood by well before LinkedIn came on the scene, you know. And so I think it's really important for us to look at how we can leverage all the great things that's happening in the world right now with technology. While many people see it as a threat, it's been proven time and time again that technology can actually be something to leverage, can be a tool, can even be a weapon if you get into the competitive landscape, to create USPs, to help you in the recruitment world attract better talent more quickly, more accurately. It can certainly eliminate the need for highly qualified people to be spending time on very low skilled tasks. In other words, let technology handle that so that the recruiter, the person who's actually out there looking for that great talent, can focus on the more high add value element of the funnel. So I'm a big fan of leveraging technology in the recruitment process, absolutely. But it should not replace the touch piece, which ultimately is most important. If I'm standing at that door of the bus as the captain of the ship, right? I'm going to make that decision. Do I want this person on my bus or not? I don't let technology make that decision for me. But getting that person to come to the door of the bus, I would really like to ask for help from technology to do that.
So I think whenever there is a technology shift, something come new, the people write obituary of a lot of things, So, and as you rightly mentioned, that technology is always an enabler. If you consider it a threat, something is wrong with you. If you consider it your greatest weapon, you can win the world's best wars. And as you mentioned, that leveraging technology with human touch, because that nobody can take it away. I'm sure there could be a situation after some time when robots doing webinar with a robot. So that days are not, much far from here. But having said that, technology is built by human, and that particular piece cannot be taken away. Whatever technological advancement that happen, I'm pretty sure people must need to learn how to leverage technology, and those who do take next level.
Absolutely. Again, it's been proven time and time again. And I think, it's important for when we're in the middle of this kind of change that we're experiencing right now, it's good to look back at history because lessons can be learned. There is a repetitive pattern over human history going right back to when the wheel was invented, or if you want to say discovered, well, let's call it invented, but it was there. Someone just realized you could leverage this shape to do things, right? And then of course, fire and so on. Well, keep going. Whenever there was a game-changing, groundbreaking invention, let's call it, it was either considered a threat or a friend. The ones that looked at it as a friend are the ones that were able to accelerate and thrive. And I think that's exactly where we're at right now. I saw it firsthand, certainly when for example, CRMs and ATSs were born, Alok, way back in the day, when the first notion of an applicant tracking system was born. Before that, it was Excel spreadsheets. Before that, it was your Rolodex. There were no candidate databases. They were just business cards that you would put in alphabetical order. Then we migrated to Excel spreadsheets. Even some people saw that as a bit of a threat, right? That it would dehumanize the process because you had spreadsheets that were searchable and so on. You could do auto mass emailing. Again, dehumanizing. No, all of that just helped us get closer to that add value touch piece we talked about earlier. I don't think that's ever going to go away. One of the interesting things with all the studies that are being done on AI and Gen AI and robotics, one question that stumps AI and robots and so on is, how do you feel? Because technology, by design, does not have emotions. So when you ask a robot or AI, how do you feel about something, they're going to give you a very vanilla, generic answer, which lacks feeling. Isn't it interesting? So, and we know the recruitment process involves a lot of emotion, feeling. There are studies that have been done, and I did my own informal study particularly with CXOs. And I asked, when you go through all the science of recruiting, right? So you do your funnel, you do your long listing, your short listing, you do your interview process, you might use psychometric evaluations and so on, right? Ultimately, when you decide to pull the trigger to actually hire a person, let's say particularly a senior leader, what is the deciding factor? So I surveyed, probably over 100 CXOs over the years, sometimes informally over dinner. How do you make that decision? And this probably is not going to surprise you as a senior leader, Alok. After you've gone through all the science of filtering out the candidate, the ultimate decision is made based on gut feeling.
Correct.
Gut feeling. Isn't that interesting?
Absolutely.
So once
Absolutely.
again, what are we proving here? What are we proving? We're proving that technology can only take us so far through
Correct.
this process. And then ultimately it's a decision that's made on a gut feeling. Now, where does gut feeling come from? Gut feeling is actually wisdom. And where does wisdom come from? Previous experiences, successes and mistakes, both, right? That becomes wisdom and helps you get a better eye for the right talent.
I'm seeing a lot of questions coming in, guys. We'll encourage you to keep writing questions. We'll take end of the session.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you
see
very much.
questions. I see hands coming up, and also my WhatsApp is also lighting up as well.
Wow,
So
wow. I think some of the very, very interesting discussions we have been doing right now. So when talking about how people need to leverage technologies, AI, and of course human touch and guts. Even though a lot of time people talk about when we talk as a technology, Erica, which is our AI recruiter, it gets you the auto shortlisted basis what you see into the resume versus the job description. But of course, as a human, of course, we do the AI bot interview through the paid form, getting you to the end, how you need to take a final decision. And again, things can come to you through a mechanic manner or AI driven manner, but ultimately it's your guts which you need to define whether you want to go ahead with a person or not. So you would find it exciting. My brother-in-law is based at Sydney. He's a doctor radiologist. He's saying technology is going to disrupt huge way in diagnostic business, in medicine. But at the end, the signature has to be done by a doctor, certifying that yes, this is how it's to be, because of what you mentioned just now, sheer experience. Of course, the AI can drive a lot of value proposition, get deeper, give you a right-driven analysis like you do candidates analysis. But at the same time, at the end, you need a certification, and that is the human angle you need to bring in.
Absolutely agree. And I think we need to put our pole in the ground, all of us who are watching today as well, and take a stance. Is technology your friend or is technology your foe? One or the other. I encourage everyone to look at technology, everything that's happening, and things we can't even imagine yet are coming. We know that, right? I mean, it's already happened in the past 5 years. We didn't know what AI really was 5 years ago. Chat GPT was not even a word that existed, right? And here we are. So, I think there's going to be more coming. Taking the stance that it is your friend will help you become future ready. And that also requires learning. And so, one of the things I talk a lot about is future ready leadership is also about constantly learning. And let's look at it and I know, Alok, you're into fitness as well. And many of the, effective leaders, let's say the game-changing, the exceptional leaders that I've been around, not just in business, across every arena, sports, politics, arts, business, keep going. These are leaders that take care of themselves, both physically and mentally. Because when you think about leadership, really, what are you doing? You're leading people through good times and bad. It's very similar to being an athlete, a professional athlete, I would say, right? A professional athlete is highly disciplined about how he or she takes care of their body, right? And more recently, we discovered the importance of mindfulness as well. So now you have professional athletes that are spending a lot of time also taking care of their mind. Well, it's the same thing with the future ready leader. These are muscles that need to be built, and you have to do the work. So I've actually created something called the Future Ready Leadership Gym.
Oh,
this concept
wow.
of virtual gym where people can go to build the leadership muscles to be future ready. And so that's something actually I'm spending a lot of time on right now. And part of that is also about how we attract the right talent that have the future ready skills.
I think that's a very interesting terminology you've been using, Paul. Let me admit it. Future ready leadership gym, building the right muscle to drive leadership. I think I had certain follow-up questions which has been partly covered in the discussion we are just now having. So you spoke about the future ready muscles being built as an organization. Of course, when you talk about in the context of as an organization as a whole, I have follow-up questions on what key qualities and skills while you create, because of course, when you go to gym, you keep on doing a lot of things, how organization should prioritize while hiring for future roles. At the same time, we spoke a couple of things about technology, chat GPT. We spoke about how computers change the dynamics, then internet change the dynamics, then smartphone change the dynamics. Now AI, Gen AI, we're talking agentic AI. So we are also working on that. When you talk about agentic AI, people talking about now the entire task management, which is being assigned to recruiting team or any function, would also be replaced by agents. So what would be your additional thoughts while we talk about the future ready muscles being built as a part of the entire ecosystem of skill development, at the same time the AI going to the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. So defining future readiness is also fluid. It's not static, right? So what we define as being future ready today might be very different from five years from now, let alone 5 years ago, right? So future readiness is, again, I'll come back to the word I mentioned earlier, which is agility. Well, what is agility truly? Agility is being nimble. It's being flexible. It's being able to move sideways and forward and backward, to be able to deflect, to know when to defend and when to attack. It's that ability to shift from mode to mode to mode. Okay, that's one. That is a very basic, important, let's say, characteristic of a future-ready leader or a future-ready talent. The next point is upskilling, learning. I think the ability to learn is something really interesting that only human beings have. Huh? Isn't it interesting that there's only one species on this planet that can wake up in the morning and say, you know what, today I'm going to start to learn Japanese.
Yep.
Right? You can actually make a conscious decision to learn Japanese. Or AI. I know nothing about AI. Well, I'm going to get on the AI learning curve. I'm going to make a conscious decision to do that. And the wonderful thing about our current world is that we have learning at our fingertips, thanks again to technology. We have all kinds of online learning. A lot of it is free. A lot of it is interactive. We have access to this conversation right here, which we didn't have just a couple of years ago. And again, COVID in a way kind of triggered this concept of webinars and online learning. It really has kind of grown and exploded. So again, human beings have the ability to wake up and make the decision to do it. But I'll go back to what I said earlier. You have to do the work. For example, becoming a leader and getting the job title on your card does not necessarily make you a great leader just by having the business card and the title. You have to go to the gym and do the work, the virtual gym, so to speak. So I would say certainly, having those basic skills of being agile, that's a mindset, but it's also, I think it's both physical and mental. Then secondly, always be learning. And so I would ask, and this is something I ask in interviews, and it may be for those talent acquisition folks out there or any leaders who are hiring. One important question to ask candidates when you're interviewing is, tell me about something that you've learned recently. So using the word learning, right? You'll be surprised when you ask that question. And you're not giving specifics about, tell me about a book you read or, a course you've done. Just tell me about something you've learned recently. An open-ended question brings remarkable answers. Sometimes you'll find something out about the person you didn't know. For example, the person might say, well, actually, I'm in the middle of doing an executive MBA right now, part-time while I'm working. Well, that's not on the resume. Interesting. Tell me more about that. And then you might find out that person has family, has children, and so on, and balancing all these things. You just learned something about that person. Probably very good at time management. Very passionate about learning. In spite of having so many balls in the air, this person is investing in him or herself to learn. You just learned something really important about the person, right? So asking that open-ended question about what have you learned recently. On the other hand, someone might say, well, I made a bit of a mistake recently at work. I made a proposal that we would do something and it didn't work out, but I learned something really valuable from it. And here's what I learned. Wow. Great. Again, this person is self-reflective, introspective. These are future-ready skills that we want to uncover. So in the interview process, I would absolutely encourage people, leaders and talent acquisition professionals, to be asking questions around learning. That uncovers some valuable insights.
I think there's a good input for me. Well, I'll take some interviews, so I think this question is probably I'm not asking. I think great insight. Thank you very much. I'll definitely take some leadership lessons joining your gym. to build some muscle there around. So I think
you're already looking in better shape, Alok. Thank you.
All inspired from you. Thank you very much. So I think you spoke something very interesting about agility, how you are agile in your entire process, what you bring in when you are ready for work every day. Every day is a new day. You have to get new learning. You have to deliver new values, right? At the same time, learning and unlearning, which is very, very important today. And, who were thinking 20 years back that learning would be so easy. Today, even if I'm not in Oxford, I can get used to see any of the top, professors' videos available online. I don't have to get into college to get learning.
True.
And today, that's the reason the shift from college-based learning to skill-based, hiring process. So hiring is tremendously changing. It's not from where you passed out or have you studied something. It's more about learn something rather than studied something. So learning is always, as you mentioned, agility. Learning is more agile. It keeps you thinking when you learn how I would apply in my actual when I do actual work and real life scenarios. So I'm pretty sure what 2 points you put forth are really key for any organization to build that muscle, create that environment of bringing agility in open environment and at the same time the learning culture.
Absolutely agree. Thank you. It's very well said. And I think learning in and of itself is actually a muscle, right? So learning, and some of us stop learning along our journey because we get into a comfort zone. We get the position, we get the title, we get the desk and so on. And then we kind of hit that comfort zone and we plateau. This happens a lot with many leaders that I've seen over the years. And those are leaders that are typically stop learning. Those are the leaders that will see technology as a threat.
Correct. So I think coming back to another question, to a segment of questions. We were talking about earlier, long back, need-based jobs, because your job was a need and you used to live forever with a job. Today, we're talking job is not the only thing which you do. It's a luxury because you want to really look to see what you are learning, adding value to your learning ecosystem or how you are delivering the value to the organization you have been working with. So that there is a tremendous shift from the, we say, pull and push effect while you acquire and attract the talent. So my next question to you is, attracting the right talent starts with strong employer branding. Yeah. What steps can an organization take to align their employer branding with their vision of being future ready?
This may be the hottest topic of our conversation today. It's also something I'm extremely passionate about, because employer branding is something that a lot of organizations struggle with. And I've spent a lot of time with CEOs, with CHROs, with heads of PR and communication and so on, who are kind of, struggling with this question. What is our employer brand? Is it the product we make or the solution we offer if we're a services company? Is it the brand? Is it our brand story? For example, we've been around for 100 years and so on and so on and so on. Is that the employer brand? And I would say yes to all of the above, but that's not enough, because those are quite vanilla and generic, right? Employer brand ultimately, and by the way, this is backed up on research, real research that was done by Randstad, but also by McKinsey and also by E&Y, right? And we're going to talk about diversity and ED&I in a moment, I'm sure as well, because it's an important topic, right? So what we discovered is that, one, this is universal through data, that why people join companies, why they stay in a company, and why they leave. There's very clear data on this across cultures, across industries, it doesn't matter. So here's what's interesting. A lot of people think, people join because of money. Well, there's not one country in the world where the data shows that that is the number one reason. It's in the top 3 in a lot of countries, including India, by the way, where money is one of the deciding factor. But there's not one country in the world where it's clear that money is the number one reason people join or stay at a company, okay? The number one reason, on average, around the world the reason people join a company is because the company has a purpose and a mission that connects with me. I'm passionate about what this company stands for. I'm passionate about where the company is going. That's by far the number one reason. So purpose, and we keep hearing about this purpose, start with why, right? Jim Rohn's famous quote, when the why is clear, the how is easy. These are all things I absolutely believe. Many companies are not really good at expressing their purpose. And by the way, we want to be the world's number one company in XYZ. In other words, the largest company. That's not a purpose. That's an outcome. That's not an employer brand. That's an outcome of doing the right things and having the right people on the bus. Okay, another one, top 3. Why did you join this company? Why do you stay? I joined because of the leader. And that leader may be the leader I'm working for directly, my direct manager. In other words, I didn't join this company, I joined this leader. I decided to join this leader. Why? Because I believe that this leader would invest in me, spend time with me, mentor me, help me grow, provide an environment where I can shine. So I'm joining the leader. Why do you stay? Because of the leader. Why do you leave? Because of the leader. So these things are actually crystal clear for us, but a lot of companies struggle with that. So if you know that the best talent will be attracted to a powerful, compelling purpose, then as an organization, you have to crystallize that purpose. It needs to start with why. Heart first, head second. We want to be the biggest. That's an outcome. That would be the second part of your story. The first part is, what do you really stand for? So start with why. Build a mission or a purpose or a vision around why. Then go to, what does that mean? Oh, well, it means we become number one in the world, right? And secondly, if people are joining companies because of the leader and staying because of the leader, then we now need to help our leaders be equipped to attract great talent. In other words, we need to coach our leaders on how to be talent magnets rather than simply the head of a particular function or more business. So this is also a future-ready leadership muscle that needs to be built. So the best organizations are doing that. They're doing exactly that, what I described.
Absolutely. So I have seen you through, and during your stint in India during 2017 to 21, if I'm not wrong, and you have been the most flamboyant CEO I ever seen. Take this credit to, I've not seen that kind of leader, which has made not only impact on building your own personal brand in India, because everybody knows you in the industry, and also you are able to bring your employer's brand, Randstad, to the new level, and this is something which I have very closely observed during your journey throughout your tenure in Randstad India. So when you talk about the big organization, of course, people are really fascinated to, learn more. They have better name or identity when we look at it individually as a person to make a choice while taking a decision to join a company. But coming back to a smaller organizations which face greater challenges in attracting the talent due to limited resources compared to well-funded or larger organizations. So my follow-up question to you is, can you share any innovative strategy for smaller organizations looking to make a big impact with employer branding, how they can build that?
Absolutely. There's some great examples out there, but let me turn it around. Let's turn it upside down. I actually believe the smaller organization has huge advantages over the big organization. So, everything we do as leaders, we start with something called assumptions, right? And there's 2 types of assumptions. There's healthy assumptions and there's toxic assumptions. I think one toxic assumption is those who work in smaller organizations that feel that they're handicapped versus the big organizations in acquiring talent. That's simply not true. A lot of the smaller organizations have an advantage. Why? Because they have leaders that are fully committed, because they are smaller, who have that kind of, let's call it underdog mentality, hunger, ambition. And when you're a smaller organization, what does that mean? I've worked for both. I've worked for big ones and small. I worked for the world's largest. There is a plus and minus in that. The large companies, let me tell you, and I'm sure you know this, Alok, yourself, but everybody who's listening, large companies move slow. Traditionally, they move slow. Decisions are made in a slow way. It's a huge ship. And if you want to change direction as a huge ship, it takes a lot of time. Even if it's the right direction, it takes a lot of time, a lot of steps, approvals, analysis, more analysis. By that time, it's often too late to change. The smaller organizations don't have the luxury of taking that time. They're like turbocharged speedboats, right? And that is a huge advantage. That's one, okay, the ability to move quickly. Secondly, leaders have the opportunity to have more of a direct connection with employees when you're a smaller organization. The engagement is stronger, typically, in the smaller companies than it is in the bigger companies. And the data shows this. The larger the company, the more difficult it is to have high employee engagement, right? Because it's a big machine. Some get it right, but it's tough. It's tough as a large organization. If you don't have the resources to invest, for example, in learning and development, that doesn't mean you can't develop your people. What I said earlier, people join people. When you have leaders that are encouraged to spend time with their team members, to develop them, to mentor them, to help them grow, then people will join and people will stay.
I think very well said. So, what you're talking about, that how the smaller organization bring agility, adaptability, and the direct connect from leaders, because the learning which you as an individual can have direct from the leaders in a smaller company and setup, that is unimaginable. And I always believe personally to start career with the smaller companies, or if you have something to deliver and you want a quick value proposition, what you want to bring on table, always look for opportunities to join the smaller organization where you can create a bigger impact faster. At the same time, the larger organizations, they understand that they are the large ship. You take decision, it takes time to bring the impact or even decision to the table. They are bringing the small entrepreneurship, in a small segment. And that's what to move faster in the decision making. So today, if you look at the biggest threat any of the largest organizations in the world have, they are already from the smallest company in terms of technology disruption as well.
This is true. Yeah. In fact, I was at an event. So you mentioned in the outset, I'm an external advisor to Bain Consulting, and I was at a Bain breakfast last week with the head of OpenAI Japan, so working directly with Sam Altman. And we were having a great conversation about AI and so on, and the future of how AI can be used. And it used to be back in the day, for a company to grow to remarkable heights, that meant having a lot of employees. In other words, huge investment to grow to be, let's say, a multi-billion-dollar company. And the hypothesis now is that you don't have to have 1,000 employees or 10,000 employees or lots of capital investment and so on in investing in people to grow your company to be, for example, a multi-billion-dollar company. Leveraging technology, you can actually do it as a lean, agile organization, thanks to technology. So in a way, we could say that the smaller organizations have a bit of an advantage now, moving forward into this new world. So again, I like the idea of kind of turning this upside down and viewing technology as an enabler. Yeah.
Guys, who are listening to this webinar, so make a point. Go to the organization where you can make bigger impact, and no other organization than the smaller one where you can get that platform to do the same, right? So great. So let me come back to a very, very hot topic today, which has come in conversation, something which Trump has been talking about, the diversity, inclusivity, and equity in totally different way it has gone. So when we talk about the era of rapid digital transformation, evolving business needs and economic uncertainties, organizations can no longer rely solely on a traditional permanent workforce. The future-ready enterprise is one who strategically blends permanent, contract, and gig workforce that bring them agility, efficiency, and innovations. You would be happy to know, Paul, the gig workforce market size going to touch $1.87 trillion by 2030. And in India, by 2030, 10% of the workforce will be the gig workforce, right? So balancing stability and flexibility while ensuring compliance, productivity, and engagement. The organization looking to really create a right mix of the talent, which is diverse. So my next question to you is, for organizations to be future ready, how important for them to build the right mix of set of employees, whether perm, contract, or gig workforce? How gig workforce is going to play a major role in the organization's future strategy?
Absolutely critical. In fact, this is something that I would say Well, towards the final kind of part of my tenure in Randstad and as a CEO, of course, within Randstad, both India and Japan, we were talking a lot with our clients, so companies that we're hiring, about this thing called workforce planning, right? So every organization, regardless of the size, needs to think about your workforce as a pie. And how do you divide that pie up? For example, what percentage of your pie should be core full-time employees, permanent employees, versus contractual workers versus temporary versus a bench, for example, or an outsource model, and so on. And of course, gig is part of that story as well. And even to take it one step further, what percentage of your workforce could actually be AI? Could be bots.
Correct.
That can be a percentage of your workforce. You can look at that as, again, as workforce planning. So this is something that I think that recruiters can play a big role. Any of the recruiters out there right now watching can actually get on the learning curve in terms of workforce planning. What does a healthy pie look like for an organization? And keeping in mind that every organization is different, has different challenges. Depending on the business you're in, you have seasonality, for example, right? If you're in e-commerce, you're in Amazon, Flipkart, companies like that, well, you're going to have seasonality, right? So you want to be careful you're not overstaffed with core full-time employees, but not understaffed as well for the temporary contractual workers. You need to have the ability to upscale and downscale depending on the needs. So that's something that becomes very, very important in any industry now. So workforce planning. It also helps you protect your balance sheet and your profit and loss when you have an agile workforce. So I'm a big fan of workforce planning. I think every organization should have a healthy balance of all the different kinds of work. We'll call it fluid work, right? From core full-time employees to, again, gig to temps to contracts to even bots as part of your workforce.
I think
so. This is where, and by the way, Alok, I would say this is where recruiters need to be moved from being transactional to being much more let's call it advisory focused, solution providers, customized rather than plug and play. Recruitment used to be about putting a person in a seat in some way, shape, or form, temp or perm or contractual or so on. I think it's much more than that now. It's about being much more strategic. So all leaders should be thinking about what does our pie need to look like? What is a healthy pie? And have this conversation about workforce planning.
I think the key takeaway statement I will take is that AI is part of your workforce. So let me tell you, Paul, whenever I make a statement or maybe a demonstration or presentation to some of our customers, so I make a statement that Erica, which is our AI recruiter, is equivalent to your 52% of your recruiting workforce. It is assistant to every recruiter because if you are hiring 100 people, up to 50%, 52% are either auto-sourced or engaged by Erica. So Erica is the equally part of your workforce, and that's what you mentioned about how you make AI as your workforce. At the same time, the key metrics any financial person looks at, I have been CFO or company secretaries in large organization called Hero Group. People always talk the metrics, the per employee revenue or profitability. With AI coming to play and you use AI in every facet of your functions, there's a possibility you can have up to 5 to 10x of the impact in that particular matrix, which is huge. And of course, when you're talking about the recruitment, the transformation from transaction-based to the value-based talent hiring ecosystem, that's where the people are, looking to go next level. Thanks for, I think, a lot of good value-added points you brought into this.
Thank you, Alok. I absolutely agree with you. And this is, again, where recruiters need to be ready for this. Future readiness means being ready for this new world of workforce planning and factoring in things like AI and so on. Yeah.
So I think, let me take you to one of the very interesting questions, which I was talking at the beginning of this section. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, have been at the forefront of organizations' priorities over the past decades or so, right? With businesses realizing the impact of diverse teams on innovations, decision-making, and employee engagement. However, recently, the regulatory or political shift in the US have challenged traditional DEI initiatives, sparking, debates on long-term sustainability of this terminology. My question to you is, how important is DEI for organizations to be future ready, especially given recent changes in US DI initiatives? Does this hold relevance now?
Well, this is another hot topic, and it's a controversial topic in some ways. I always like to come back when you're going to talk about anything, Alok, and maybe this is something I learned from Marshall Goldsmith, actually. Define the language that you're using first. So we're all speaking on the same level, right? In other words, what do we mean by D, E, and I? Exactly, right? So we can talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but what is diversity? What is equity? What is inclusion, right? And in my definition, diversity is having a group of people together that come from different worlds. Different worlds means different lenses. They see the world through different lenses. You can have a room full of Indians, and you can have a lot of diversity in that room. And I certainly saw that firsthand in India, the United Nations of India. I mean, it's an incredibly diverse country if you bring somebody from north and south, east, west, right? And so that there's diversity. But not only that, of course, there's gender and there are all the other elements, streams of diversity. But diversity is more about how do you see the world? Now, someone who is extremely extroverted and sales-minded and aggressive, that's one profile. Someone who's quite introverted and reflective, that is an element of diversity, isn't it? When you bring people together who see the world in different ways and kind of behave in different ways. You can be from the same town, from the same neighborhood, from the same block, but there can be diversity in that room. And I think that's first thing to mention, right? The equity part is really about giving everybody a voice, allowing everyone to have a voice. And this is also a characteristic of future-ready leaders. Leaders who commit to creating an environment in the organization where everyone has a voice and everyone has the ability to be their true best selves, the true version of themselves, and everyone has the chance to shine. Doesn't matter who you are. Aggressive, conservative, right? Reflective, extremely outgoing. It doesn't matter. Everyone has an opportunity, male, female, it doesn't really matter, right? So all these things come together to form equity. Everyone has an equal opportunity to shine. And then, of course, inclusion, again, is what I said earlier about the voice, but that also is where leaders need to kind of take the extra step sometimes to bring people in who, that quiet person sitting in the corner may have a brilliant game-changing idea. It's up to the leader to involve that person, to give that person a chance to contribute and so on. And that's where B comes in, right? The belonging piece. McKinsey did a study. It's quite a famous one called Diversity Matters. And then they did another one in 2023, Diversity Matters Even More. So they did 2 subsequent studies. The data is very clear that organizations that are diverse in every way are organizations that perform better. Sustainable performance, growth that outgrows the market. These are organizations that are financially strong, that are innovative. They attract the best talent, they retain talent, they have customer loyalty, which is better than their competitors, and so on. So, when you talk about E, D, and I, and B, belonging, it's absolutely an advantage for an organization in the competitive landscape. So in spite of what's happening in the US and so on, I think this is kind of I believe it's more of a, let's shake things up a little bit, drop a rock in the pond and see the reaction. I don't think anyone is going to take the stance that diversity is a bad thing. We know that diversity in the room makes us all stronger. And by the way, I would even argue that Trump is an example of diversity, isn't he?
Absolutely.
He's not a politician. He's not acting in a political way. In a way, he's a great example of diversity in politics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's the most. You can expect any unexpected thing from him.
Whether you agree, that's a different story. We won't get into politics.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, anyway, back to the point, to answer your question, I think it's a very easy answer. And the data shows it that diverse organizations are stronger on every level. Every level. And remember, diversity is not just about gender and everything else that we define diversity as. It's easy to fall in that trap. It's about gathering people together that see the world through different lenses. That's it, different perspectives. They bring different perspectives to the table and different abilities and so on. And then, of course, giving everyone a voice and an opportunity to shine. That, in my mind, is true diversity.
Great. I think so. We had so far great discussion. I think we are at the end of the session. Let's take up some of the questions because I had more questions for you, but let's see some of the questions we can answer, raised by some of the viewers. So first question from Ravi Shankar, vision and value system, which should be imbibed and indoctrined with the people. Yep. It is like HP way, Bill and Dave, which has been followed. Maybe your point on that?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of it.
So he's mentioning about vision and value system, which should be imbibed and indoctrinated with the people. So how do you take up that particular structure?
Okay, Ravi, great question. That was something that I had to struggle with in the beginning when I arrived in India, because I think we lost sight of our values. There was really no vision, and that was something we needed to do in tandem. So first of all, values are not here. They're not in the head. They should be in the heart. So I think a lot of organizations put their values on the wall, for example, and they display them, but they don't actually take them off the wall and put them on the table and talk about them and talk about how they're being lived. So one thing is to really talk about, what does it mean if you have a core value of transparency, for example? What exactly does that mean? How is it lived? Secondly, celebrating the behaviors, because core values are really behaviors, right? So spotlighting, identifying, celebrating those behaviors. So having, for example, an opportunity to spotlight or hear from someone or reward someone who is really living the values and going the extra mile. So talking about the values, leaders should be talking about the values, often recognizing behavior that represents the values. And that is a really key part. That's called walking the talk, right? The vision now is a different story. And in my book, I devote quite a chapter to this on Envision, the first E. This is where I think a lot of leaders struggle, and certainly I did. And that's why I wrote the book, because I kind of had my aha moment. But the vision really needs to start with why, as I mentioned earlier. What is your vision as an organization? What is your purpose? Where does it, and how is the world going to change when you bring that vision to life? And how do your core values connect with bringing that vision to life? This is a really important thing. Sometimes organizations forget to connect the core values with the vision, with the purpose. Right. So this is, when you get that right, then naturally you start to get momentum, because you bring people on board that connect with your core values and the vision, your purpose. Those come together, and that creates behavior, which then creates culture in the organization to execute on the vision.
Great. I think Ravi Shankar, you've been driving some, discussions there. Thank you very much for that. And similar question from Gautam Vohra, who mentioned about, how can organizations synchronize vision versus mission, which you answered, with future-ready hiring to ensure alignment with long-term goals and evolving workforce needs. I think maybe quick point if you want to add here.
Yeah, Gautam, I mean, that's a great question. And that would be the next phase. And I've done that in organizations that I've led as well. Start with the purpose, right? Marry them with the core values, and then you start to roll up the sleeves and get into the actual execution plan. And this is where, I'm a big fan of making promises. I think ultimately in an organization, the high performing organizations, what happens is they make promises. Who do they make promises to? Well, you make promises to your customers. Of course, we all have customers. You make promises to your customers. You make promises to each other, colleagues. You make promises, of course, to the company you work for. And that comes in different shapes, whether it's a target or deliverables. And you make promises to society around you. When we're making promises and we're keeping those promises, and it's fueled by core values which are leading us to a mission, we can't help but achieve it.
Got it. So further question from him, how can AI-driven technology revolutionize hiring and recruitment by seamlessly integrating human expertise and machine intelligence to bridge the gap between talent availability and skills demand in a future-ready workforce? I think we touched upon during our discussion, but still you want to add any point?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple quick points. This is a 1 hour discussion alone, this topic right here. I would carve up the question, but I just want to take a piece of it and just say, it's not about replacing the human part. I think if you look at the recruitment funnel, right? Whether you're hiring temp staff, contractors, whether you're hiring en masse, large volume, or whether you're hiring individual senior executive, doesn't really matter. The funnel is very similar, maybe more steps when you're, into the higher volume zone. But the point here is technology should replace the low value, low skill pieces. Let's even call it admin related to the funnel, right? So it's like casting a huge net into the pool of talent. Well, let technology do that. Let technology filter out that huge pool and bring it down and trim it down to a solid pool of candidates. Then from there, the filtering starts. But then you have things like onboarding into a system. And of course, if you're talking about temporary workers, contractual workers, then you're talking about payrolling and so on. At one point, you might have offboarding. A lot of these things in the funnel can be done by technology. So that's very important. But I wouldn't allow or expect technology to make those critical decisions about the actual hiring of talent.
I think one question from Sarita. Hi, Paul. How much can we rely on DISC profiling test reports for talent acquisition decisions?
DISC as in DISC, the psychometric DISC?
Possibly, yes. DISC is profiling, correct.
Myers-Briggs, DISC, there are so many, 16 personalities, so many. I've used all of these, including DISC, by the way. Big fan of it, but never as a deciding factor for hiring. I don't believe in psychometric tests, evaluations, and so on. That should be something that should change your decision about hiring someone. Remember what I said earlier about diversity? By the way, DISC or Myers-Briggs and others are really good models or formulas to use to diagnose your team, to say, wow, look at this. Look at the different profiles we have here of personalities on our team. Is it vanilla? Do we have a leader who's hiring a bunch of mini-me people? Or do we have a leader who's creating a team of diverse personalities? Because we know that diverse teams are performing better. It's really interesting to see. And I'm guilty of it, by the way. Guilty as charged back in the day. If you were to look at my team and give them a DISC test, guess what? They would all rank high on the D. Dominant.
But you always believe in having the instinct or a gut feeling to bring in, rather than DISC assessment giving you some kind of maybe analysis to you about the person.
Well, I realized at one point that I was hiring a bunch of mini-me's, Paul Juniors, and I realized that that doesn't lead to sustainability or future-ready teams. And I realized that I needed diversity. I need different kinds of people, different from myself. And I realized that it's like a mosaic. The more you have diversity and variety in your team, the stronger you will be. And so I purposely worked hard to create teams that were diverse. And using DISC and Myers-Briggs is a way to do that, but I would not use it as a deciding factor in hiring.
Perfect. So I think another question from Anup. There are now Gen AI voice assistant available with certain companies, which interacts both ways. Screening process of asking the right question to candidate and vice versa. Would this not take away a recruiter's job to a large extent? What's your views as we go forward?
Yeah, for example, you could run it through ChatGPT right now. You could say, please prepare 10 compelling questions to be asked in an interview for a candidate, for a head of marketing, or whatever it is. You could come up, and it will generate questions for you. The magic doesn't happen in the initial question. The magic and the insights are discovered in the follow-up questions, right? And that's an ability that humans have to be agile on the spot. How many times have we been in interviews, whether you've interviewed for a role or you've interviewed candidates, so on, where you uncovered something really interesting or concerning in the second question, the follow-up question? So I think, again, AI is going to help us. It's going to help us get to a certain point, but at one point you turn off the AI autopilot and the human piece comes in. By the way, it's same with airplanes, right? We know that the hardest part of the entire journey for the pilot is really the takeoff and the landing. Why? Because the autopilot's off, and that's when that's where the art and the science comes in. And I think it's the same with interviewing candidates as well. You can use generic questions for the first filter, but the magic comes and the insights come in the second, the follow-up questions that tell me more about that, or when you probe a little bit. Yeah.
I think that's the key. Of course, many times we always talk the recruiters how they should learn to probe candidate, but today AI is doing quite a good job in doing that, because of course, as you mentioned, the people have to really do the job better way. They should not be threatened. They should use technology to aid them to be the better, to be the better side of the coin. So another question which would be very interesting for you, from our Jyoti Sarkar. When you got charge of Randstad India as a leader, how did you analyze the challenges and how did you strategize to overcome those? those challenges to make such a remarkable turnaround?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't get the name of the person.
Avarjyoti.
Abhijiti, thank you. Well, big question. Again, I wrote a book about it. I encourage you to, if you're interested in hearing the story behind the story, then it's in my book, and it is a long story, so it's hard to answer it now. But I would say, I thought long and hard about this. I was living in Bangor in the beginning, and I arrived in India, and I was I'd never been to India, and I was suddenly tasked with this huge mission, really, and being the only non-Indian as well. Now, in the end, in hindsight, looking back, that probably was an advantage because I was able to ask lots of what we would call dumb questions, like, hey, why do we do it like this? Because I was not coming from within India, and I wasn't coming from the industry in India. When I heard of demonetization, I had no idea what that was. There was no GST. I mean, these were all the times when, India was really in the midst of big change. So I was able to ask a lot of those basic questions. That started to trigger thought. And I think that was a good thing, asking those so-called dumb questions and starting questions with why. Why is a powerful question, right? The next one is, I spend a lot of time asking what if. So questions that begin with what if. Now, there's a bit of psychology in this. When you ask questions rooted in why rather than what and how, because what and how and so on, that's tactical. When you ask why, it triggers the right side of the brain rather than the left. Okay. When you ask what if, now you're really triggering deep in the right brain because you're thinking about possibility. It triggers creativity, maybe dreaminess to a certain degree, imagination. So I was asking a lot of those questions, and that started to kind of change the vibe and the mood in the company. So that was one thing that I did early on as well. But I also realized that I needed to get out there and take a pulse check. And I mentioned earlier, I met 150 people around the country, around the organization, and I listened to them, and I started to get a sense of what was really on people's minds and also in their hearts, right? Then from there, when you do that as a leader, you start to identify the buttons to push. And once you know what those buttons are, that's really what a leader does. He or she pushes buttons. And when you push the right buttons, you get a positive response. And then the momentum starts to build. And that's why we call it a movement. Leaders create movements. So I hope that, that's a very short answer to the question, but there were a lot of things that happened along the way, a lot of drama as well. But I will tell you this, I was very, very lucky that when I arrived in India, there were a select few leaders in Randstad, India, that quickly came on board with this Canadian guy who parachuted into India, who had no idea what he was doing, but they supported me on my team. There were many who didn't, and there were many that had to get off the bus. But the ones who stuck with me and we stuck together on this mission and we believed and we kept asking why, what if, and so on, they're still there and they're doing great. And that includes the current MD, Vichy, and of course the current CHRO, Anjali, both very well known in the industry in India. They were key people that came on board and helped drive us, and they continue to do it. And that's why Randstad India continues to perform.
Your energy, that I must admit, is infectious. The passion is, you can unrelenting speak volume of things, give a lot of advice during your discussions, the conversation. So since we are at the end of the discussion, so thanks, Paul, for sharing your valuable insights. I'm sure that people must have got good learning or takeaways from today's session. And just to summarize some of them, of course, a future-ready organization is built on a foundation of talent that aligns with this long-term vision. Recruitment is not just a process, but a strategic lever that impacts employer branding, culture, retention, and leadership succession. And the role of recruiter is expanding, requiring them to think strategically and act as trusted advisor, using technology as a handy weapon for them. So for our audience, thank you for joining us and be with us throughout the discussions. And of course, we overshot little time extra, and we hope you found this session insightful, and we will share the recording and additional resources in forthcoming follow-up mails to you as well. And thank you, Paul, once again, for really driving this discussion with a lot of energy, enthusiasm, and a lot of content for us to take away with.
Well, it's my pleasure, Alok, and thank you. And by the way, congrats to you as well on all the great stuff you were doing, just provoking these kinds of conversations, but also what you're doing to help the recruitment industry in general become future ready. And again, thank you to so many people who have been sending me messages. My WhatsApp is on fire. I'm getting messages from
I'm
many,
sure
many
you will have a lot of
countries,
time
by
to
the way,
respond.
India,
So,
Japan, Canada, even. There's people in Europe watching as well. So thank you all so much for joining today.
I think I must say, because when I see your journey, future ready, the so much, to learn from you and how you transform to be a leader, which is of great impact, bringing transformation and turnaround, and, entire organization to now take up as advisor, coach, and bringing and building something unique. What you must have thought of as your journey to be future ready for yourself. I'm sure maybe last note you like to say your personal journey to be there where you are, from being a top-notch CEO, flamboyant CEO, to an advisor, mentor, maybe an investor, or to where you are today, writing and being an author, outstanding author.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's been an amazing journey. From the moment I arrived, I guess, in Japan in 1990 with a backpack and my life savings of a few $100s, sleeping on a park bench, not knowing anyone, to, the journey I've had. I'm very, very grateful. And so many people have supported me along the way. And I think all of us can say that, Alok. None of us got from there to here alone. And it's important to recognize that and be grateful for it. I absolutely am. At the same time, I really enjoyed my time in the corporate world. And I could have stayed, absolutely, but I decided that it was time to go to the world and support a larger audience, enabling a larger audience, leaders who are on a mission to be future ready, organizations who are on a mission to be future ready. So I am spending my time, as you said earlier, I'm doing advisory. I'm also doing some coaching, a bit of leadership coaching. I am working with some organizations in India, but also across APAC, in Japan, of course, on helping them be future ready. This goes across industries. It's not about staffing and recruitment only. It's really any organization that's on a mission to be future ready. So I'm really enjoying this ability to partner, advise, support, enable leaders and organizations to be future ready. This is really, right now, this is kind of my key passion, and I have to say, really, really enjoying the moment.
I love to learn more from you. Maybe when we meet, I'm sure whenever you